All right. So getting into it, really, in this chapter, really, as we read, we're reading about kind of the social mirror. He talks about responsibility, or what he calls responsibility. The freedom to choose between stimulus and response, which I think is huge. Act or be acted upon, the power of language, circle of concern and circle of influence, the haves and the bees, making the commitments, making and keeping commitments. And then there's a section as well, depending on which version you have, for kind of new insights on habit one as a whole. And so just as a summary, but reading this chapter before we really dive into it, did this cause any paradigm shifts for anybody, kind of using, the terminology he does? What's up?
Yes, it did. So can I tell you, I got an entire divorce because I used to tell my ex-husband that I was a reactive person. And if he would stop being an asshole, I would stop reacting like an asshole. And after I finished that chapter, I realized I was the asshole.
So
there's that.
Yeah.
There's that. And I realized that, being proactive in the first chapter, maybe I don't have the ability to dictate my first reaction, what my brain goes to internally, but I do have the ability to dictate my second reaction. And that's where you can be proactive in everything that you're doing. So I still am glad I got divorced.
Throwing up the filter to keep you don't want coming out of your mouth to come out of your mouth.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Not that I'm sad I got my divorce. I just wish I'd have used a different excuse.
Right.
I completely agree with you, though. I feel like I tend to blame everything on me being reactive to what the emotions are. And then, sitting back and kind of thinking over things afterwards, I'm like, oh shit, I actually probably should have, I probably should have looked at it from a different point of view, because it's not them, it's how my actions are affecting the situation. So I loved that.
Right. Steve, what about for you?
Well, I mean, this is like one of those classic, it's easier said than done things. I mean,
right.
We know this all the time. I mean, it's like with my kids, we try and teach them all the time. It's like, crap's going to happen to you when you get out in the world.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So you've got to, that's how you deal with it. That's you. The fact that crap's going to happen to you, crap's going to happen to everybody. Everybody's going to be sitting. Everybody's going to be sitting in the shower, in the poop shower at some point. You're going to get crapped on. You know what I mean? It is what it is. How do you live with it? But it's funny because reading about some of the like the proactive language versus the reactive language, it made me realize, all right, I'm, as much as I like to think I'm there, it's like, crap, I do use a little bit of that reactive language versus the proactive language,
Right.
So it's cool because, like, coming out of the Habits book, this is a cool book because it shines a light on what we think we know, but it's like, you really it's going to call us to really, bring it to front of mind and really pay attention to it, So I think it's huge, though. It's especially in real estate. There's so much that we don't control, and it's how we react to it that depends. Will you be around in 5 years?
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's interesting because kind of to you guys' point, it's almost like when you turn on a light or you check under the couch or you check under the bed, and it's like, well, I thought everything was good, but now you're seeing all these, you kind of bringing things to light, and it's almost like a what is it, like bringing the awareness piece in. It's like, okay, well now, it can be a bit of a hard pill to swallow, at least for some of these things, and so I guess he kind of talks through, almost some ways to kind of get there, and kind of like, so talking through the language and talking through, for instance, freedom of choice. He kind of talks about freedom of choice. it kind of puts a different perspective. So you have your response and then you have your reaction, and it's like the space in between is where your freedom lies. And so I don't know if you guys remember the example that he used, but he talked about, I think it's someone that was in like a prison camp, or something similar of that effect. And, you know, one of the guys, all he did was just change the way he reacted to anything that came his way. And he found a sense of freedom in that. So I don't know if you guys have any like examples of maybe a time where, you know, you exercise some of that freedom of choice, or, you know, even an example where maybe exercising that freedom of choice could have come with a different I guess consequence or action. Have you guys had any of those examples?
I think for me, what tends to end up happening is, you know, when I'm talking with adults, I tend to be more reactive with my conversation. And then, you know, I used to be a nanny. When I'm talking to my kids, I'm more proactive with how I approach things, how I talk to them, because I want to make sure that, you know, when I do say like, hey, don't do that, it's not more out of like anger that they're doing something wrong, that I'm trying to teach them and, you know, help them grow from there. And I have to be a lot more careful and try to remember that with the freedom of what my reaction is how that relationship is going to end up growing in the future. And it's like the same with adults. That's how your relationship goes. So I am trying my best to be more, you know, centered and make sure that I think over what I do before, and it's all that mindset like he was talking about, and then move on with what the relationship is and how I approach different topics and things.
Right.
For me, it's very similar, because I think that, you know, atomic habits goes hand in hand with being proactive, right? Because to be proactive, we're taking little teeny tiny steps. Like today, for example, I've got a house that we have under contract. The HOA has been telling us that the secretary is going out of town starting today for 2 weeks, and she'll be unable to be, you know, to get in touch with. Well, the president called me today and she kind of lit into me, and I was in the middle of a meeting, but had to take the call. So I had an agent sitting here I was coaching, and I took a breath in, because the first thing out of her mouth was so aggressive. And one of the small things that I'm trying to change is, and it's just funny that this is the first chapter, is not allowing people to dictate, not being reactive to their behavior, but being proactive in how I want to actually conduct myself. And it was like today, you know,
Right.
normal me would have been like, hold up, lady, get out my ass, stop yelling at me. We've been trying to get in touch with your secretary since Thursday. Okay.
Right.
I have multiple emails to this woman. But instead, I allowed my brain to go there first reaction, because I don't have control over that. But then that second reaction, right, that space between, what does he call it? Hold on, I got my notes in front of me. The space between the stimulant and the response, in that space, when I was stimulated, I took my atomic habit, breathed in very quickly, and then started speaking. And so for me, it's finding that space in between those two moments. And a lot of times it's just a split second, but conducting myself in a way that I want to be remembered, right? By the time we got off that phone call, her and I were laughing, and she apologized for being an ass at the beginning of it. And it could have been so different. So for me, this first chapter has just been a complete awareness of, what does that split second between the stimulant and the response look like for me, so that I can be who I want to be. I can say what I want to say. I can do what I need to do. You know, if I'm picking up the phone and making a phone call, do I actually make the call? Do I dial? Or do I let that very heavy phone stop me from dialing? And it's taking control for me of that split second between those two moments.
Right.
The cool thing, I think, almost, all right, maybe this is a broad brush, but I think most everybody is kind of reactive, because they don't pay attention to it.
It's human nature. Yeah.
And I think that being aware of the fact that if we're going to go into a hot button situation, if we know they're coming, if we can almost put the wall up ahead of time and be like, there, and the classic example of this was, I don't know if any of you have ever read, I'm sorry, no, we're crossing the streams here, but if you've ever read Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, it's a negotiating book, fantastic book. I highly recommend. Maybe we do that at some point.
It sounds like a good book to read, and you lead the conversation, Steve.
Oh, I love that book. Love that book. Anyway, what he talks about in there is one of the things that he liked to do as a negotiator was sometimes if he gets in a hot, whatever hot situation, he'll turn to the person and say, hey, I'm sorry. I'm an asshole. I am so sorry. I'm the asshole. I completely effed that up. And how do we make this better? And the fact that, but he did that proactively. That wasn't a reactive thing. That was a proactive thing, knowing that. And that he said, you use that, you disarm every single bad situation. So, but knowing that people are coming at you reactively, if you can proactively deal with it reactively, you know, just knowing that little bit, you know, is going to set us apart, you know, going forward.
Right.
And then that ends up building trust, and you continue to keep growing a really fruitful relationship from there.
Right. Right. Yes. And so I guess for me, it's changed, but what does it mean to be proactive? And how does this book kind of change maybe your original outlook over proactivity?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I had a sales trainer that I used to have before I got into real estate. And their saying was, you don't let how you feel dictate how you act. Let how you act dictate how you feel. You know, there are plenty of days where we get kicked in the teeth and the next day we got to go back to work. And I don't want to go to work. We don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to not eat the donuts. You know what I mean? But if we consciously say, this is what we're going to do, you know, it turns our bodies around, it turns everything around and puts us in the right frame of mind. If we let the day derail us every day has a potential to derail us, you know? So that's what the proactive thing means, is that, you know, you've got to be on top of it. We've got to own it, you know? How we own it dictates where we're going to go.
Yeah. I think for me, what I have been noticing is that I need to be more truthful with how I feel in the moment and understand how to move from those emotions. And then that way I can be more proactive with how I talk to people and go from there, instead of just kind of like how Laura was talking about, how when that HOA lady, the president, called her, I would have totally done the same thing where I've been like, okay, you're being an ass. Like, yeah, yep. But taking a step back, being honest with myself, being like, all right, how do I feel in this moment? Is this something that I need to be reactive in? Because there are times where you do need to fight for yourself and be more aggressive. But the majority of the time, I just need to take a breath and then move on. And that's what I really took away from this chapter.
So for me, being proactive means power. Like, it was very, very empowering to have control, right? I think being a reactive person allows everyone in your environment to be in control. Being a proactive person allows me to be in control at 100%. It doesn't matter what the situation is. If I know that I am proactively looking for a new buyer, then I'm going to set my day up and be in control of that day. If I'm proactively looking for a new client, you know, a seller, then that's how I'm going to set my day up. Right now, I don't know if y'all know this, but Craig and I both started an Atomic Habit. I've got some health issues that are just snowballing. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with what I'm consuming. I think I've acquired some kind of weird allergy. And so for the last 2 months, I've actually been tracking what I was eating and walking my dog consistently every single day. And Craig and I go out sometimes at 11 o'clock at night to walk the dog a mile, because I have made the decision that I'm going to be proactive, that my dog deserves that. And that's a goal on my It's a small atomic habit to change my life for a better, healthier life. And it has just been very, very empowering, because no one anymore dictates, do I achieve that goal? Do I talk to that person the way I want to talk to them? Did I get that client to the closing table? Did I throw a kick-ass engagement party? Like, sorry, we just had David's engagement party this weekend. But it's all powerful, right? Like, I actually feel a ton more powerful today than I did yesterday because of that. And I would have never considered myself a weak person. I'm very much an alpha. I was coaching with Stacy the other day about getting people in my office. And the first question he asked me was, can you have, another dominant personality in your office? And the answer was no, but it's never been that I've not been an assertive, dominant person. I've just never had that level of proactiveness that allows me to actually be in charge with literally the next step in my life. No matter what it is, life may give me lemons. I now have the choice to make lemonade or just suck lemons.
Right.
I love that outlook.
Yes.
It's just very powerful. It was a very powerful chapter to me.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. I like that. I like that. And one thing, so I've heard control a few times. So looking in the chapters, so he actually talks through kind of direct control, indirect control, no control, and then how that relates between what he calls the circle of influence and the circle of concern. I'm curious you guys' thoughts on really the circle and kind of how he labels those controls. For me, I feel like the control categories, I guess you could call it, really almost makes, expanding your circle of influence that much easier, because it's almost a guide. It's like, where do you put your focus so that you can expand your circle of influence? And I guess on top of that as well, expanding the circle of influence, do you guys agree with, expanding the circle of influence, or do you have other thoughts on the circle of concerns?
So I think you should be in control of your circle of influence, because at the end of the day, the only thing you can control is yourself, right? I can't control the HOA president and how she responds to me and her frustration. And I get her level of frustration. If I'd have been her, I would have been just as frustrated. But since the only thing I can control in that whole situation was me, I proactively chose to pull her back from the ledge, take her little feet from, falling off, and jump in. And as I brought her into my circle, the only thing that was allowed in my circle was something that would fulfill my cup or make me not have that initial negative response. So for me, I just think it's, it's maintaining as much control in that circle and only allowing the things in that fill your cup up positively, and understanding that really and truly the only thing you have control over is yourself.
Right.
I completely agree.
Those circles cannot dictate everything if you are mindful of what goes in them.
Right.
We all know people who have, because they have just a negative outlook. I've got a good friend of mine, love him to death. Name is Michael. But man, everything awful happens to Michael. Everything, and it's just, it's so much negative energy, and it's just everything. And to the point where I'll talk to him, but sometimes I see him calling, I'm like, I'm not answering that phone because he's going to run a bitch for 15 minutes. But you see he has a small circle, I mean, you can see, that negativity and that, that shrinks that circle of influence. He doesn't have, whereas opposed to if you are, proactive about things and, you are helpful and whatever, you have the bigger circle, people can lean on you, things like that.
Should recommend the book to him every time he complains.
I'll recommend them something.
That's a new way to insult somebody. Just recommend a book that they
Right.
You have an emotional problem. I want you to read this book. I'll let you know what he says.
Well, but to your point, Steve, it's exhausting to have those people in your circle. My husband's got one who, we love him to death, but his mom passed away when he was very young. He went to college and got a degree as an attorney, and he's literally living paycheck to paycheck off some woman that he's not in love with. They have 2 kids. They live in New York. They live in a co-op situation. They're in about 600 square feet with 4 of them. They can't afford anything else because neither one of them want to move out. And it's like Craig, when he looks at that phone call and he sees that that's who's calling, he's almost like, that reaction comes in. He does not want that negative in his circle. And he won't even tell me about the conversation afterwards because he's like, you don't want to hear it. Like, because I've put those, I've stayed in control of what's allowed in because I can't stand somebody can't help themselves.
Yep.
Right. And he just won't help himself. He won't. I mean, he could probably be making $1 million with all these online ways to make money, but he chooses to reactively sit and mope and not, his mom's been passed away, I think, for like 30 years. They're almost in their 50s. I think his mom passed away when he was in his late teens, early 20s, and he's just never done anything to recover from any of that. And he's allowed that to dictate everything, and it makes him exhausting. Like, it is draining to deal with that kind of personality.
Yep.
Right. So I like that. I'm gonna turn that into a question for you guys. So Steve, Laura, you guys just gave 2 good examples. Based on what we've read from just this chapter alone, is there any way you guys could help those type of people in your life just based on some of the stuff that Steve's talking about in this book?
I mean,
I think just,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, you go.
I think just being honest. The biggest thing is that people are scared to be honest these days, and they don't want to, let others know when they need to, start taking care of themselves better. Start, being proactive. Don't sit like your example, Laura, of that guy and mope. You have to be able, if you want anything to change, you have to be able to get up and do it. And it may be an insult, but recommend those books to them. I don't, let them know like, hey, this is something that I'm concerned about. I want to be honest with you because we have this relationship, and that's a way that you can be proactive because, you never know what's going to end up happening to them, how they're going to end up living out the rest of their life. So I think for me, I want to make sure that for the circle of people that I know, because my roommate's the same, where he just doesn't, care about himself. He constantly wants to talk about all these horrible things that are going on in his life, where he's the one in control of those things, where he's not getting enough sleep. He's not taking care of himself. That's on him, and that's on no one else. So he can't come to me and expect me to agree with him on those things. And so me being honest with him and letting him know like, hey, I think that you need to work on this and go from there. That's being proactive on my side, so that then he can in turn be proactive on his.
Right. Steve, Laura, you guys have anything different? Anything to add?
I mean, I think it's probably it's an art form, probably trying to figure out how to bring that up. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I'm blunt. I straight to the point.
Well, I mean, certain people go straight to the point. They go straight to the point back. Oh yeah, well, but you don't understand why I am this way. You know what I mean? And so so I'm sure that there's an art form. I mean, yeah, we do have probably an obligation to help people out. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's obviously, you got to put boundaries up. I mean, my helping you out can't pull me down the rabbit hole.
Right.
It only goes so far. But I always think back to, I was with a real estate team at Keller Williams, good friend of mine, left his team after 3 years. We haven't talked since, after a couple years. And anyway, before I left, he gave me some advice about what to do going forward. And I know it made him sick to do it because he was pissed off. And I was kind of pissed off, and we're both pissed off, but he sucked it up and gave me some very good advice that I'll never forget. And, so there is a way to do it, you know what I mean? And still be impactful. I don't know what that is.
Right.
Maybe it's in some of the later chapters, but
Right.
Well, for me, I think I have spent a lifetime trying to fix everyone in my
Mhm.
circle. If you know me, you know that I love hard and that I want to, if I can fix it, I'm going to. And that's just, and so what I have actually found myself probably over the last 5 years is trying to be the example, but also trying to find that happy balance of, and it kind of goes back to being reactive to proactive, but trying to find that healthy balance of, I still love you. I still want you in my life, but you exhaust me.
Mhm.
Like I literally can't with you. I mean, I've got a lady who I answer stuff on social media all the time. So I end up in these one-off conversations with people. And there's a lady, she's super sweet. I've never met her. I've never even talked to her on the phone. She gets my Christmas card. We talk back and forth on Nextdoor, but oh my God, she's such a Debbie Downer. And I used to spend like hours some days responding back and forth because I felt like it was my responsibility to fix what ails this person. And again, that goes back to the proactive to reactive. I have now decided to be proactively conscious about how much time I actually pour into those type personalities, because a woe is me. I don't care what you tell them, what you give them. There's a moment in life, usually for those people, that the switch flips. And again, like atomic habits, it's really not one moment, it's a lot of little things that snowball, but most people feel like it in there, like, oh, that's the moment I got my life back together. The
Right.
odds that we are that moment are very slim. So for me, it's been more of a just being the example, and if they choose to follow or have questions, I'm always here to help. But I no longer spin my wheels turning, trying to help people. And I think that change happened in my 30s, because I think that's when I realized that, I can lead a horse to water. I can't make him drink.
Right. Right. No, I agree. I feel like all three of you guys are you guys really got this chapter. I love this chapter. And I mean, kind of just what you were talking about, circle of concern versus the circle of influence. I mean, those negative, I mean, negative Nancy's, Debbie Downers, whatever you want to call them, just any negative energy. I feel like that really should become part of the circle of concern. And then the focus should be minimizing that circle of concern so that you can increase that influence. Because I almost feel like, a way to indirectly kind of help is to focus on your circle of influence. Because the things that you can control, they're going to provide more influence over individuals or over, negative thoughts than, anything they may want to hear. Because, I mean, to you guys' point, there's just going to be another excuse, and it's, why pull your energy down, when you can just focus on your circle of influence. So yes, no, I believe that's awesome. And then one more thing I wanted to ask. So in this chapter, I guess looking forward in you guys' personal, professional lives, what most excites you? Now kind of, having a new kind of almost different definition of proactivity and kind of how to implement it into you guys' lives. What are you guys most excited about?
The permission of being in control. I think a lot of times I feel like I can't make that better decision or take that step because it's not politically correct, or it's going to hurt someone's feelings, or, it's not in line with what somebody else thinks. So for me, it's very empowering to be in control here, because I feel like that's where all the magic starts.
Right. It's a powerful tool. Steve, Abigail?
The growth of relationship because of knowing how to react with different situations. I'm really excited to be able to see where that takes me, especially with my business, getting to talk to people and grow from there.
Absolutely.
For me, it's a reminder. It's a lot. For me, there's a lot of. I have 6 kids. Some of them are extremely young, and not sleeping very well. So
I just heard one.
there's a lot of crankiness that goes on in this house. Some of it comes from this guy. But a lot of times it's like, you know what? I know the kid's not going to sleep. I know that, stuff like that's going to happen. I got to put on a pot of coffee and put on my big boy pants and let's go crank out some phone calls, So, and that's the cool thing about, and that thinking about that when I left my team and I came and did my own thing, it's like, it used to be, well, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we do this? Can we do that? It's like, I don't have to ask that anymore. Like we get to be proactive. We get to make the decisions. We don't have to wait for somebody else. So this chapter just helps to remind me I have to be more cohesive, like all the way around, not just career-based, but family-based too.
Exactly. Perfect. Awesome. Well, we've got about 5 more minutes. Any closing thoughts, statements, questions, anything maybe we didn't talk about?
Well, which chapters are we going to next? Are we doing
Yes.
two, or are we doing 2 and 3?
No, just that the next one is begin with the ending in mind. If
Correct.
you're reading it by audio, it's a 2-hour read. So it's going to take about the full week. If you're on a 30-minute reading regimen, it's going to take about the full week to get through.
Okay.
It's a really good chapter. I'm actually listening to it the second time.
It's a good.
Overachiever over here.
That's an important. I haven't read it yet, but just the idea of it. I mean, you hear so many people talk about that in real estate, since it's kind of where most of us are. When making plans and stuff, that's where you have to be.
Right.
You can't fly by the seat of your pants today. Where are we trying to go? We got to build it.
Exactly.
Looking forward to it.
Same here.
Me too.
Can't wait, guys. I'll see y'all next week.
Thank you guys. Steve, it's good to have you back. Steve, it's good to have you back, man.
It's a pleasure to be back.
I'm glad
we were able to work out the contract details. You got me 3 years, $36 million. Money well spent. Congratulations.
See you guys next week.
Bye.
See you guys.